Fix this engine, and I'll marry you. CEO. Victoria Sterling's voice cut through Innovate Tech's holiday party like a whip. 200 Silicon Valley executives erupted in cruel laughter as she pointed her manicured finger at Isaiah Washington. He stood frozen, trash bag in hand, staring at the $2 million Ferrari engine bleeding black oil across white marble. The vintage Colombo 512 had seized completely. Tomorrow's investor meeting was ruined. Victoria stepped closer, designer heels clicking. Her wedding ring caught the chandelier light as she gestured mockingly. "What's wrong, janitor? Not man enough?" Phones lifted. Executives doubled over, laughing. Someone shouted, "Do it!" The oil spread wider, staining the pristine floor like spilled blood. Isaiah's grip tightened on the trash bag. Victoria's cruel smile widened as she savored her moment of public humiliation. "I wasn't joking about the proposal." More explosive laughter. More phone recording. Have you ever watched someone call the wrong person's bluff? This wasn't the first time Victoria Sterling had made Isaiah Washington the target of her cruelty. It was just the most public. Innovate Tech Solutions stood as a gleaming monument to Silicon Valley success. 40 floors of glass and steel housing the world's most advanced robotics company. Worth $500 million. Victoria's kingdom, inherited when her father stepped down 2 years ago. Isaiah had been working the night shift for 3 years. Invisible, forgettable. Just another face in janitorial coveralls moving through hallways after important people went home. It started small. Snide remarks when their paths crossed. "Still here, Isaiah?" Delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. Then came performance reviews, sudden, unexpected, designed to find fault where none existed. Victoria's assistant would schedule surprise inspections of Isaiah's work. Always when Victoria happened to be nearby. Always loud enough for others to hear. "This trash bin isn't completely empty," she'd announce. "Standards matter in a company like ours." Other employees began picking up the thread. "Maybe Isaiah can fix everything and marry the boss." Became the running joke in break rooms. They'd laugh behind their hands, grateful someone else was the punching bag. Victoria would find excuses to summon Isaiah during busy periods when other employees could witness interactions. She'd critique his uniform, question his cleaning supplies, demand explanations for imaginary infractions. "Isaiah, why is there dust on this picture frame?" she'd ask, running her finger along a surface he'd cleaned hours earlier. "Do we pay you to do half the job?" The humiliation was always public, always calculated. The harassment escalated when Isaiah made his mistake. 3 months ago, he'd been cleaning the engineering department when he overheard the team struggling with their prototype robotic assembly line. The conversation was heated, frustrations boiling over. "The calibration sensors keep failing," Senior Engineer David Park complained, throwing his tablet onto the workbench. "We've lost another week of testing." "The timing sequence is completely wrong," added Junior Engineer Lisa Carter. "But we can't figure out why the feedback loop keeps glitching." Isaiah paused his mopping. He'd seen this exact problem before. The solution was simple, a timing adjustment in the feedback loop combined with recalibrating pressure sensors. He'd implemented it successfully at General Motors years ago. "Excuse me," he said quietly, setting down his mop. "Have you tried adjusting the sensor timing intervals? Sometimes the feedback delay causes cascading errors in... Did someone ask for your opinion?" Lead engineer Michael Rodriguez spun around, his voice dripping with contempt. "Stay in your lane, janitor." The room fell silent. Other engineers looked up from workstations, some embarrassed by Michael's harshness, others nodding in agreement. "I was just trying to help," Isaiah said softly. "I've seen this problem before." "You've seen what exactly?" "You clean floors, you empty trash, you don't solve engineering problems." Word reached Victoria within hours. The next day, she summoned Isaiah to her corner office. Victoria's office occupied the entire northwest corner of the 40th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered commanding views of Silicon Valley below. Her desk, larger than most people's bedrooms, was positioned like a throne. Awards covered every wall: 40 under 40, Tech Innovator of the Year, Silicon Valley Rising Star. Photos showed Victoria shaking hands with celebrities, politicians, industry titans. "I hear you've been offering engineering advice," she said without looking up from her laptop. Her fingers continued typing, each keystroke deliberate and sharp. Isaiah stood in the center of the vast office, feeling like a defendant in court. You were overstepping." Her fingers stopped typing. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. "You clean toilets, Isaiah. You empty trash. You do not tell our engineers how to do their jobs." She finally looked up, studying him like a scientist examining a specimen. "Do you know what happens when employees forget their place in companies like this?" "No, ma'am." "They find themselves working somewhere else, usually somewhere much less prestigious." The threat hung in the air between them. "Are we clear?" "Yes, ma'am." Victoria began implementing what she called performance enhancement protocols specifically for Isaiah. Random drug tests appeared on his schedule without warning. Equipment inspections scrutinized every tool in his cart. Schedule changes came with no notice, forcing him to rearrange childcare and transportation. "Nothing personal," she'd tell her assistant loud enough for Isaiah to hear. "We just need to ensure all our employees meet Innovate Tech's standards." The harassment became systematic. Victoria would schedule mandatory safety meetings during Isaiah's lunch breaks. She'd reassign his cleaning routes to include executive floors where her allies could monitor his every move. The real irony? Innovate Tech's robotic assembly line continued failing spectacularly. Quality control reports showed a 40% defect rate unheard of in the industry. The engineering team worked overtime, their stress visible in darkened eyes and shortened tempers. Every failed test cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. Every missed deadline pushed them closer to disaster. The $50 million contract with automotive giant Meridian Motors hung in the balance. Victoria blamed incompetent staff in board meetings while deflecting questions about technical problems. But privately, she was panicking. Her father had built Innovate Tech from nothing. She'd inherited a thriving company and was watching it crumble under her leadership. The pressure made her increasingly volatile. She began targeting more employees, spreading blame like wildfire. Non-essential personnel became her favorite phrase, always spoken while her eyes found Isaiah across crowded rooms. Marketing manager Jennifer Walsh received a scathing review for a campaign that performed exactly as projected. Software developer Alex Kumar found himself reassigned to menial tasks after questioning a security protocol. Accountant Maria Santos was written up for attitude problems after requesting overtime pay. The pattern was clear. Victoria needed scapegoats for her failures. The threats grew bolder. During a company meeting last month, she'd announced potential layoffs. "We need to streamline operations," she declared from the stage, her voice carrying to every corner of the auditorium, "starting with those who don't contribute to our core mission." Her gaze settled on Isaiah, sitting in the back row where maintenance staff were expected to sit. The message was unmistakable. Sarah Carter, Victoria's HR director and college roommate, enabled every bit of it. When employees filed complaints about the hostile work environment, Sarah would schedule mediation sessions that somehow always ended with complainants receiving written warnings. "We take all concerns seriously," Sarah would say with practiced sincerity. "But we also can't tolerate false accusations against leadership." The complaints stopped coming. Fear became the company's unofficial policy. Meanwhile, Victoria's public image remained pristine. Tech magazines featured her on covers as Silicon Valley's rising star. She gave interviews about innovation and leadership while systematically destroying careers of anyone who questioned her authority. Her TED Talk, Leading with Vision in the Digital Age, had garnered 2 million views and countless accolades. Industry publications praised her decisive leadership style and commitment to excellence. The disconnect between public perception and private reality was staggering. Tonight's holiday party was supposed to be a celebration. Innovate Tech's biggest investors were here, along with board members and potential partners. The guest list read like a who's who of Silicon Valley power brokers. The Ferrari engine, a vintage 1962 Colombo 512, had been Victoria's centerpiece, a symbol of engineering excellence and company prestige. She'd discovered it at a Barrett-Jackson auction, outbidding 3 other tech billionaires in a highly publicized battle. She'd paid $2 million for it, calling it an investment in our brand narrative. The engine sat behind reinforced glass in the lobby's center, surrounded by museum-quality spotlights and brass plaques detailing its racing history. Victoria had personally overseen its installation, demanding perfection in every detail. "This represents what we stand for," she'd told the facilities manager. Precision. Excellence. Legacy. When people see this engine, they should think of Innovate Tech's commitment to engineering perfection. Now it was broken. Oil pooled beneath the display case, spreading across Italian marble that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a month. Tomorrow's crucial investor presentation would start with explanations instead of celebrations. Victoria needed someone to blame. And Isaiah, as always, was perfectly positioned to take the fall. The crowd still surrounded them, phones recording, executives whispering. Victoria's initial outburst had been instinctive: humiliate the help, get a laugh, deflect from the crisis. But something in Isaiah's stillness made her double down. "I'm serious," she announced, her voice carrying across the lobby. "Fix this Ferrari engine, Isaiah. Do it in front of everyone." She gestured grandly at the dying machine, oil still spreading beneath it. "Prove you're worth more than your janitor's paycheck." The laughter grew louder, more vicious. Someone started chanting, "Fix it! Fix it!" Others joined in, their voices echoing off marble walls and crystal chandeliers. Victoria's smile widened as she felt the crowd's energy feeding her confidence. This was perfect. Tomorrow, when investors asked about the broken centerpiece, she'd have the perfect scapegoat story. The janitor who thought he was an engineer, the employee who finally overstepped beyond redemption. She could already see the headlines. Innovate Tech streamlines operations after employee incident. "Come on, Isaiah," she taunted, stepping closer to the oil spill. "Don't keep us waiting. Show us these mysterious skills of yours." Board member Margaret Thompson watched from the back of the crowd, her expression unreadable. She'd been questioning Victoria's leadership style for months, noting unusually high turnover rates and declining employee satisfaction scores. This public humiliation felt like a line being crossed. What Victoria didn't know about Isaiah would soon make her marriage joke the biggest mistake of her career. Victoria's cruel words echoed in Isaiah's mind as he stood there, trash bag still clutched in his hand. "Fix this engine and I'll marry you." If only she knew what engines he'd actually fixed. 30 years ago, in a cluttered garage in Detroit, an 8-year-old Isaiah Washington watched his grandfather's weathered hands bring dead machines back to life. Samuel Washington had been a legend at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. For 15 years, he'd calibrated the rocket engines that carried America's dreams into space. His fingers could diagnose problems that baffled teams of engineers. His intuition turned mechanical mysteries into simple solutions. "Every engine has a heartbeat, boy," Samuel would tell Isaiah, his voice carrying the wisdom of decades spent listening to metal and pistons. "You just got to know how to hear it." The old man's workshop was built from salvaged materials, rusty tool cabinets rescued from closed factories, workbenches made from reclaimed oak, lighting cobbled together from spare parts. But from that humble space came repairs that astonished Detroit's automotive elite. Isaiah spent every weekend and summer in that garage, absorbing lessons that no university could teach. By age 12, He could rebuild a carburetor blindfolded. By 15, he was solving problems that stumped professional mechanics. "Precision isn't about the tools you have," Samuel would say, watching Isaiah adjust a timing belt with surgical accuracy. "It's about understanding what you're fixing." That motto became Isaiah's North Star through everything that followed. At Georgia Tech, Isaiah's professors quickly recognized his unusual gift. While other students struggled with theoretical concepts, he could visualize complex mechanical systems in 3 dimensions. His senior project, an innovative robotic assembly line design, caught the attention of General Motors' recruiting team. They offered him a position straight out of college. For 7 years, Isaiah thrived at GM's Lansing plant. He led the team that revolutionized their assembly line robotics, reducing defect rates from 12% to less than 2%. His innovations saved the company millions while improving worker safety and efficiency. The Meridian project was his masterpiece. Isaiah designed a fully automated system that could adapt to different vehicle models without manual reconfiguration. The technology was years ahead of its time, combining artificial intelligence with precision mechanics in ways that seemed almost magical. "This kid's got something special," his supervisor told the plant manager. "He sees machines like other people see people." But Isaiah's gift came with a burden. He noticed everything flaws in processes that others missed, inefficiencies that cost thousands of dollars daily, safety violations that put workers at risk. When he discovered that management was cutting corners on safety protocols to meet quarterly targets, Isaiah faced an impossible choice: stay quiet and keep his comfortable career, or speak up and risk everything. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "A man's character isn't measured by what he builds, boy. It's measured by what he's willing to sacrifice to build it right." Isaiah chose truth over comfort. The whistleblowing investigation that followed vindicated everything Isaiah had reported. Federal inspectors found dozens of safety violations. Workers who'd been injured due to faulty equipment received compensation. New safety protocols prevented countless future accidents. But Isaiah's career was over. GM couldn't officially retaliate, but the automotive industry is smaller than it appears. Word spread through unofficial channels. Other companies found excuses not to hire him. Consulting firms declined his proposals. The man who'd revolutionized assembly line robotics found himself unemployable in his own field. When his mother was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, Isaiah's choices narrowed further. Her medical bills consumed his savings. His daughter Emma needed stability, not a father chasing engineering jobs in distant cities. The janitorial position at Innovate Tech wasn't a career, it was survival. But Isaiah never stopped being an engineer. During quiet night shifts, he'd observe the company's struggling robotics systems with the same analytical eye he'd brought to GM. He identified the exact problems plaguing their assembly line within his first month on the job. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. The timing sensors were calibrated incorrectly, creating microsecond delays that cascaded into massive inefficiencies. A simple recalibration combined with updated software protocols would eliminate 90% of the defects. Isaiah had written detailed proposals, complete with technical specifications and implementation timelines. He kept them in a notebook hidden in his locker, hoping someday he'd find the right moment to share his insights. That moment never came. Instead, he watched Innovate Tech's reputation crumble under the weight of problems he could solve in his sleep. Standing in that marble lobby, surrounded by mocking laughter and pointing phones, Isaiah thought about his grandfather's words. Samuel had fixed rockets that carried astronauts to space. Isaiah had revolutionized automotive manufacturing. Victoria Sterling thought she was humiliating a janitor. She had no idea she was challenging one of the most gifted mechanical engineers of his generation. The Ferrari engine before him was a 1962 Colombo 512, the same model Isaiah had restored for a collector in Birmingham 3 years before taking the Innovate Tech job. He knew every bolt, every gasket, every potential failure point. The irony was almost poetic. Victoria's symbol of engineering excellence had become the stage for Isaiah's redemption. His daughter Emma's college fund depended on keeping this job. His mother's medical care required a steady paycheck. But sometimes, a man's dignity matters more than his security. Isaiah set down the trash bag and stepped forward. "Precision isn't about the tools you have," he whispered, echoing his grandfather's voice. "It's about understanding what you're fixing." The crowd pressed closer as Isaiah set down his trash bag. Victoria's smile widened, sensing victory in his apparent surrender to her demand. "That's right," she said, her voice carrying across the marble lobby. "Show everyone what you're really capable of." But Isaiah wasn't surrendering. He was preparing. The Ferrari engine loomed before him like a metallic altar. Oil continued spreading beneath the display case, each drop representing thousands of dollars in damage to the pristine marble floor. Victoria's $2 million centerpiece had become a very public catastrophe. "I wasn't joking about the marriage proposal," Victoria announced, playing to the crowd like a seasoned performer. "Fix this engine, Isaiah, and we'll make it official." The laughter grew more vicious. Someone in the back shouted, "Kiss the bride!" Others joined in with crude suggestions that made Victoria blush despite herself. Board member Margaret Thompson shifted uncomfortably near the elevator bank. She'd seen enough toxic leadership in her 30-year career to recognize this moment for what it was: a public humiliation that would define everyone involved. The crowd had swelled to over 200 people. Word of the spectacle had spread through the party via text messages and social media posts. Executives abandoned their conversations to witness what they assumed would be an epic failure. Victoria's assistant, Sarah Carter, pushed through the crowd, her face flushed with excitement and alcohol. "This is better than reality TV," she whispered to her companion, holding up her phone to live stream the event. But not everyone was entertained. Near the back of the crowd, a distinguished man in his 70s observed the scene with growing disapproval. Dr. Robert Carter, Sarah's uncle and one of the world's foremost Ferrari restoration experts, had been invited as Margaret Thompson's guest. For 40 years, Dr. Carter had worked on some of the most valuable vintage automobiles ever built. His restoration of a 1957 Ferrari 250 Testarossa had set auction records. His technical papers on Colombo 512 engines were considered definitive texts in the field. He recognized the display engine immediately, a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO Colombo 512, one of only 39 ever produced. The engine before them wasn't just expensive, it was automotive history. Dr. Carter had personally worked on 6 similar engines during his career. He knew their quirks, their weaknesses, their secrets. He also knew that what appeared to be a catastrophic failure was likely something far more manageable, if you knew what you were doing. "Do you actually know anything about this engine?" Victoria taunted, her confidence growing with each laugh from the crowd. "Or are you just going to stand there?" Isaiah approached the display case, his movements deliberate and measured. The crowd quieted slightly, phones recording every moment. Some executives looked eager for the spectacle to continue. Others seemed uncomfortable with the cruelty unfolding before them. "Before I begin," Isaiah said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him, "I should mention that this isn't just any Ferrari engine." Victoria rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Don't try to lecture us about... It's a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO Colombo 512, Isaiah continued, his voice cutting through her interruption. "Serial number 3445 GT, one of 39 ever built." The crowd murmured. A few people looked impressed despite themselves. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. She hadn't expected Isaiah to know the engine's specifications. "Very good, Wikipedia," she said, trying to regain control. "Now fix it." Dr. Carter stepped forward, his interest genuinely piqued. In his 40 years of experience, He'd met very few people who could identify a specific 250 GTO engine by sight. The serial numbers weren't visible from this angle. "How do you know the serial number?" Dr. Carter asked, his voice carrying the authority of decades in the field. The crowd turned to look at the elderly man. Most didn't recognize him, but his commanding presence suggested expertise. Isaiah met Dr. Carter's eyes. "Because I've worked on this engine before." The statement hit the crowd like a physical blow. Conversations stopped. Victoria's face went pale. "That's impossible," she stammered. "This engine came from a private collection in Monaco. It's been in storage for 15 years, Isaiah finished, until 3 years ago when collector Harrison Webb had it restored in Birmingham, Alabama. The hydraulic timing system was completely rebuilt. The original Borani wire wheels were refinished. The fuel injection system was converted from Weber carburetors to modern electronic management." Dr. Carter's eyebrows rose. The technical details were absolutely correct, and not information available in any public database. "I led that restoration project," Isaiah continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Mr. Webb paid $400,000 for the work. It took 8 months to complete." Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The crowd's energy shifted from cruel entertainment to genuine fascination. "You're lying," Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're a janitor. You clean the toilets." "I clean them very well," Isaiah replied with quiet dignity. "But that's not all I do." Dr. Carter pushed through the crowd, his excitement barely contained. "If you actually worked on this engine, then you know about the modification Webb requested." Isaiah nodded. "He wanted the cooling system upgraded for track use. We installed a high-flow aluminum radiator and modified the oil cooling lines. We also reinforced the engine mounts to handle increased torque." "Remarkable, Doctor," Carter whispered. The modifications Isaiah described were exactly what Harrison Webb had requested, details that were never published anywhere. "Who are you?" Dr. Carter asked. "Isaiah Washington, former senior systems engineer at General Motors. Before that, I was lead engineer on the Meridian project." Dr. Carter's eyes widened. He'd read about the Meridian project in automotive engineering journals. The revolutionary assembly line design had been years ahead of its time. Victoria looked around frantically, realizing that the narrative was slipping from her control. The crowd was no longer laughing at Isaiah. They were listening to him with growing respect. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice rising to near hysteria. "Even if any of that is true, the engine is still broken. Knowing about it doesn't mean you can fix it." Isaiah approached the display case and knelt beside the oil leak. He studied the pattern of fluid spreading across the marble, noting the color, consistency, and rate of flow. "The engine isn't seized," he said after a long moment. "It's hydraulically locked." Dr. Carter nodded approvingly. "Go on." "Cylinder number 3 has oil in the combustion chamber, probably due to a stuck piston ring or valve guide wear. The oil prevents the piston from completing its compression stroke, making the engine appear seized when it's actually just blocked." The technical explanation flew over most heads, but Dr. Carter was visibly impressed. "And how would you fix that?" he asked. Isaiah stood and brushed off his hands. "Remove the spark plugs, manually rotate the crankshaft to expel the oil, then address the root cause. In this case, I suspect the engine has been sitting too long without proper preparation. The rings have probably stuck due to oil degradation." "Correct diagnosis, Doctor," Carter announced to the crowd. "And a reasonable solution." Victoria's face had gone from pale to red. Her moment of triumph was becoming a disaster. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "Diagnose all you want, but can you actually fix it, here, tonight, with janitorial supplies?" Isaiah looked at his cleaning cart, then at the broken engine, then at Victoria's challenging stare. "Yes," he said simply. I can. The crowd erupted in excited chatter. Phones lifted higher. The spectacle was taking a turn no one had anticipated. Dr. Carter stepped closer to the display case. "I'll witness this repair," he announced. "As an expert in Ferrari restoration, I can verify whether the work is done correctly." Victoria realized she was trapped. Backing down now would look even worse than the potential failure. But letting Isaiah proceed risked an outcome she hadn't considered. What if he actually succeeded? "Then do it," she said, her voice barely audible above the crowd's excitement. Isaiah rolled up his sleeves and approached the engine that would change his life forever. Isaiah approached the Ferrari engine with the measured confidence of a master craftsman. The crowd's energy shifted from cruel anticipation to genuine curiosity as he knelt beside the display case, his movements deliberate and professional. Dr. Carter positioned himself where he could observe every detail. His 40 years of Ferrari expertise would catch any bluff or mistake. But as Isaiah began his examination, the elderly expert's expression changed from skepticism to surprise. "First," Isaiah announced to the crowd, his voice carrying clearly across the marble lobby, "I need to understand what we're actually dealing with." He didn't touch the engine immediately. Instead, he circled the display case slowly, studying the oil leak pattern, listening to the subtle sounds coming from within the metal housing. His eyes tracked the spread of fluid across the marble floor, noting color, consistency, and flow rate. Victoria watched nervously, her earlier confidence beginning to waver. Something about Isaiah's methodical approach felt disturbingly professional. "Can everyone see the oil pattern here?" Isaiah asked, pointing to the dark stain spreading beneath the engine. "Notice how it's not uniform. There's more volume coming from the left side of the block, specifically around cylinder 3. Several people leaned forward, genuinely interested despite themselves. Dr. Carter nodded approvingly. The observation was technically sound. "The oil is dark brown with metal flakes suspended in it," Isaiah continued. "That tells us this isn't fresh lubricant. This engine has been sitting for an extended period without proper preparation for storage." Victoria's face flushed red. She'd bought the engine from a Monaco collector who'd assured her it was in perfect running condition. She'd never bothered to have it independently inspected. First revelation. Diagnostic mastery. Isaiah moved closer to the engine, placing his ear near the block without actually touching it. The crowd held its breath, waiting to see what this janitor could possibly hear in a dead machine. "This engine isn't seized," he announced after a long moment of listening. "It's hydraulically locked." The engineering team in the crowd exchanged worried glances. Several had already examined the engine and declared it completely destroyed. "What's the difference?" Dr. Carter asked, testing Isaiah's knowledge. "A seized engine means the internal components have welded themselves together due to overheating or lack of lubrication," Isaiah explained, addressing both Dr. Carter and the broader audience. "That's permanent damage requiring a complete rebuild." He pointed to specific areas of the engine block. "But hydraulic locks are different. It means one or more cylinders have liquid in the combustion chamber in this case, degraded oil. The liquid can't compress like air, so the piston can't complete its stroke. The engine appears seized but actually isn't damaged." Dr. Carter's eyebrows rose. The diagnosis was absolutely correct, and the explanation was clearer than most automotive textbooks. "How can you tell?" someone in the crowd called out. Isaiah smiled slightly. "Listen." He rapped his knuckles gently against the engine block in 3 different spots. Each produced a distinct sound, 2 clear metallic rings, and 1 dull thud. "Cylinder 3 sounds different because it's full of liquid," he explained. "If this engine were truly seized, all the cylinders would sound the same, either all clear or all muffled." Victoria's mouth went dry. She'd never heard anyone explain mechanical diagnosis with such clarity. "That's accurate, Doctor," Carter admitted, his voice carrying surprise. "Very few people can diagnose hydraulic lock by sound alone." The crowd's energy was shifting. The mocking laughter had faded, replaced by genuine interest. Phones continued recording, but now people were documenting expertise rather than expected failure. Second revelation, historical knowledge. But there's more to this story, Isaiah continued, warming to his subject. This isn't just any Ferrari engine. It's a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO Colombo 512, serial number 3445GT. Dr. Carter straightened. Isaiah had mentioned the serial number earlier, but now he was going deeper. How do you know the serial number? Dr. Carter asked. It's not visible from this angle. Because I've worked on this specific engine before, Isaiah replied. But more importantly, this engine has a very particular history that explains why it's failing now. He pointed to a barely visible modification on the engine's side. See that additional coolant line? That's not standard 1962 configuration. This engine was modified in 1987 by Carrozzeria Touring for track use. They upgraded the cooling system and reinforced the engine mounts for increased performance. The crowd murmured. Even people who knew nothing about cars could sense they were witnessing specialized knowledge. The modification was brilliant engineering, Isaiah continued, but it created a weakness. The modified cooling system requires specific oil viscosity to function properly. Use the wrong oil, or let the oil degrade, and it creates circulation problems. Dr. Carter was openly impressed now. The modification Isaiah described was real, documented, and extremely rare knowledge. This engine has been sitting with degraded oil for months, maybe years, Isaiah continued. The thickened oil couldn't circulate properly through the modified cooling system. It pooled in cylinder 3, creating the hydraulic lock we're seeing now. Victoria felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. The collector in Monaco had mentioned something about special maintenance requirements, but she'd ignored it as sales talk. Furthermore, Isaiah added, this particular engine 3445 GT was one of only 12 that received the Touring modification. It was originally installed in a car that won the 1963 Le Mans GT class. Several people in the crowd pulled out phones to fact-check his claims. Others just stared in amazement. The car was later owned by a private collector in Birmingham, Alabama, who had it completely restored in 2019, Isaiah concluded. I know because I led that restoration project. The statement hit the crowd like a physical blow. Victoria's face went pale. Third revelation. Innovative solution. Which brings us to the solution, Isaiah said, standing and surveying his cleaning cart. Normally, you'd need specialized tools to fix hydraulic locks. You'd remove the spark plugs, manually rotate the crankshaft to expel the oil, then address the root cause. He paused, letting the technical explanation sink in. But we don't have normal tools here. We have something better: improvised engineering. Isaiah began selecting items from his cleaning cart with the precision of a surgeon choosing instruments. Rubber gloves, a spray bottle, cleaning solution, a mop handle, rags. The key is creating controlled pressure to expel the oil without damaging the engine, he explained. I'm going to use these cleaning supplies to build a temporary pressure system. Dr. Carter leaned forward, fascinated despite himself. How? The spray bottle becomes our pressure source, Isaiah demonstrated, showing how he could adjust the nozzle for different spray patterns. The cleaning solution, when diluted properly, creates a penetrating agent that will help break down the degraded oil. He held up the mop handle. This becomes our precision tool for accessing the spark plug wells. I'll wrap it with rags to create a flexible gasket system. The engineering was elegant in its simplicity. Isaiah was essentially building a hydraulic system from janitorial supplies. The rubber gloves protect against chemical contact, but more importantly, they provide grip for the delicate work of manually rotating the crankshaft, he continued. Victoria watched in growing horror as Isaiah transformed common cleaning supplies into specialized automotive tools. The crowd was completely captivated. But here's the crucial part, Isaiah said, his voice growing more confident. This engine's modification actually makes it easier to fix, not harder. The upgraded cooling system has additional access ports that standard engines don't have. He pointed to small valves on the engine's side that most people hadn't even noticed. These drain ports were added during the 1987 modification. They're designed for exactly this situation, clearing hydraulic locks without dismantling the engine. Dr. Carter was shaking his head in amazement. In 40 years, I've never seen anyone diagnose that feature so quickly. The collector in Birmingham taught me about them, Isaiah replied. He said the modification was genius because it anticipated problems and built in solutions. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Even Victoria's allies were watching with obvious respect. So, the repair process is straightforward, Isaiah concluded. Use the cleaning solution to break down the degraded oil. Apply controlled pressure through the spray system to flush the cylinder. Use the drain ports to remove the contaminated fluid. Manually rotate the crankshaft to ensure all cylinders are clear. He looked directly at Victoria. The entire process should take about 15 minutes with these improvised tools. Maybe 20 if we're being extra careful. Victoria realized she was trapped. Backing down now would be admitting defeat. But letting Isaiah proceed risked an outcome she'd never considered. What if he actually succeeded? There's one more thing, Isaiah added, his voice carrying a new edge. When this engine starts, it's going to sound perfect. Better than when it arrived here tonight. Dr. Carter stepped closer to the display case. I'll verify the work, he announced to the crowd, as an expert witness. Isaiah rolled up his sleeves and looked at Victoria one final time. About that marriage proposal, he said with quiet confidence. You might want to start thinking about wedding plans. The crowd erupted in excited chatter. Phones lifted higher. The spectacle had become something nobody had expected. Victoria Sterling was about to learn what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. The marble lobby fell silent as Isaiah began his work. 200 executives, investors, and board members held their breath, phones recording every moment of what would either be spectacular failure or impossible triumph. Isaiah moved with surgical precision, each action deliberate and confident. He'd removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and transformed from invisible janitor into master craftsman before their eyes. First, he prepared his improvised pressure system. The spray bottle became his primary tool, filled with a carefully measured mixture of cleaning solution and water. The chemical combination would break down the degraded oil without damaging the engine's internal seals. The key is gentle, consistent pressure, he explained to the transfixed crowd. Too much force and we risk damaging the pistons. Too little and the oil won't move. Dr. Carter positioned himself directly beside the engine, his trained eye watching for any sign of amateur fumbling. But Isaiah's movements displayed decades of experience. Using the mop handle wrapped in cleaning rags, Isaiah carefully accessed the spark plug wells. His makeshift tool fit perfectly, allowing him to reach areas that required specialized automotive equipment. Now we test cylinder 3, he announced, applying his pressure system to the affected area. The first spray produced a satisfying hiss as the cleaning solution contacted the degraded oil. Dark, contaminated fluid began flowing from the access ports Isaiah had identified earlier. Victoria watched in growing horror as black oil streamed from her $2 million centerpiece onto towels Isaiah had strategically placed. Each drop of expelled fluid proved his diagnosis correct. Excellent technique, Doctor, Carter murmured, his voice carrying genuine admiration. The fluid extraction is textbook perfect. Isaiah worked methodically through each cylinder, his improvised system performing flawlessly. The spray bottle delivered exactly the right pressure. The cleaning solution dissolved the thickened oil like it was designed for this purpose. The mop handle reached every necessary access point, but the real test was yet to come. Time to manually rotate the crankshaft, Isaiah announced, pulling on rubber gloves. "This will verify that all cylinders are clear." He located the crankshaft access point and began turning the massive engine by hand. The crowd watched in amazement as the multi-million-dollar Ferrari responded to his touch like a precision instrument. One rotation, two, three. Each turn came easier than the last as the hydraulic lock released completely. The engine that had appeared permanently destroyed was moving freely under Isaiah's guidance. "All cylinders clear," he announced. "Compression feels normal. No internal damage detected." Dr. Carter checked his own watch. 14 minutes, he announced to the crowd. Exactly what he predicted. Victoria's face had gone from red to pale to greenish. The implications of Isaiah's success were hitting her like physical blows. "Now for the moment of truth," Isaiah said, his voice carrying across the silent lobby. He moved to the engine's starter system, bypassing the display case's safety locks with the confidence of someone who understood exactly how everything worked. His fingers found the ignition system, made the necessary connections. "When I start this engine, it's going to sound better than it has in years," he promised, looking directly at Victoria. "All that degraded oil has been flushed out. The cylinders are clean. The timing is perfect." The crowd pressed closer, phones lifted higher. Even the skeptics were holding their breath. Isaiah's hand moved to the starter. "Remember your proposal, Victoria," he said with quiet confidence. "You said if I fixed this engine, you'd marry me." She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. Isaiah engaged the starter. The engine turned over once, twice. In the third revolution, it caught on. The sound that filled the marble lobby was pure automotive poetry. The Ferrari 512 roared to life with a deep, throaty growl that seemed to shake the building's foundation. 12 cylinders fired in perfect sequence, creating a symphony of precision engineering. But this wasn't the rough, struggling sound of a damaged engine. This was smooth, powerful, absolutely perfect mechanical harmony. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. Phones captured every second as the vintage Ferrari engine settled into a flawless idle that resonated through the lobby like a living heartbeat. Dr. Carter approached the engine, his ear trained on the distinctive sound. After 40 years of Ferrari expertise, he could diagnose an engine's condition by sound alone. "Remarkable," he announced to the crowd. "This engine is running better than most modern cars. The idle is perfect. The timing is precise. There's no vibration, no misfiring, no mechanical stress. The oil leak had stopped completely. The engine bay was clean. The marble floor no longer showed fresh stains." Isaiah stood beside his work, still wearing rubber gloves, still holding his spray bottle. The janitor who'd been publicly humiliated 15 minutes earlier had just performed automotive magic in front of Silicon Valley's elite. Victoria Sterling stared at the running engine in complete shock. The sound of perfect mechanical precision filled her ears like an accusation. Around her, the crowd was cheering. Board member Margaret Thompson was taking notes. Dr. Carter was shaking his head in amazement. Phones were recording everything. Isaiah walked over to Victoria, the Ferrari's perfect idol providing a soundtrack to his approach. "Well," he said, pulling off his rubber gloves with theatrical flair, "I fixed your engine." The crowd fell silent, waiting for what came next. "So when's the wedding?" The Ferrari's perfect idol filled the stunned silence as Dr. Carter stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of 4 decades in automotive engineering. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the crowd, "this man just performed a $50,000 repair with $10 in cleaning supplies." The applause was immediate and thunderous. Executives who'd been laughing at Isaiah 15 minutes earlier now surrounded him with genuine respect and amazement. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. Board member Margaret Thompson pushed through the crowd, her expression serious and determined. As one of Innovate Tech's founding investors, her voice carried more weight than anyone else in that lobby.
"Isaiah,"
she said, her voice cutting through the Ferrari's rumble. "We need to talk about your actual qualifications." Victoria's face went ashen. Margaret Thompson never got involved in personnel decisions unless something significant was happening. "I have a mechanical engineering degree from Georgia Tech," Isaiah replied, finally allowing himself to stand tall. "I spent 7 years at General Motors leading robotic assembly line innovations. I reduced their defect rate from 12% to under 2%. Margaret's eyebrows rose. "The Meridian Project?" "That was mine." The crowd murmured. Several executives pulled out phones, clearly researching Isaiah's claims. The Meridian Project had been legendary in automotive circles. Margaret turned to address the entire gathering, her voice projecting across the marble lobby. "Innovate Tech is currently failing with a 40% defect rate on our robotic assembly line," she announced. "We're about to lose a $50 million contract because we can't solve problems that this man has already solved." She turned back to Isaiah. "I'm offering you the position of senior robotics engineer. Starting salary of $120,000. Your first assignment is fixing our assembly line." The crowd erupted again. Victoria stood frozen, realizing her public humiliation had just cost her everything. Dr. Carter stepped beside Isaiah, extending his hand. "I'd be honored to serve as a reference for your qualifications." Margaret looked at Victoria with barely concealed disgust. "As for the marriage proposal, I think we can all agree that's off the table." The crowd laughed, but it wasn't cruel this time. It was the sound of justice being served. Isaiah looked around at the 200 faces now showing him respect instead of contempt. "I accept the position," he said simply. But the story was far from over. Karma had one more surprise in store. The Ferrari engine's perfect idle provided the soundtrack for Victoria Sterling's complete downfall. Within hours, the video went viral. "Fix this engine and I'll marry you" became the internet's new symbol of workplace discrimination and instant karma. The footage showed everything. Victoria's cruel taunts, Isaiah's methodical brilliance, and her shocked silence when he delivered the perfect comeback. By morning, #FixThisEngine was trending worldwide. The board meeting that followed was swift and merciless. Margaret Thompson had spent 30 years building Innovate Tech's reputation, and Victoria's public display of toxic leadership threatened everything the company stood for. "The video has been viewed 12 million times in 18 hours, Margaret announced to the emergency board session. "Our stock price dropped 8% overnight. Major clients are questioning our corporate culture." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Victoria's systematic harassment. Jennifer Walsh, from marketing, provided documentation of her unfair review. Alex Kumar showed emails proving his reassignment was retaliation. Maria Santos presented evidence of her written warning for requesting legally mandated overtime pay. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source: Innovate Tech's own security cameras. Hours of footage showed Victoria's pattern of public humiliation, calculated cruelty, and deliberate targeting of employees who couldn't fight back. The SEC launched their own investigation into whether the hostile work environment constituted securities fraud by misrepresenting the company's management practices to investors. Victoria's fall was as swift as it was complete. The board stripped her of the CEO position within a week, offering her a face-saving title of strategic advisor, a ceremonial role with no actual authority. Her salary plummeted from $1.5 million to $150,000. She was required to attend mandatory diversity training and issue a public apology that would be permanently posted on the company website. The video's viral spread meant Victoria Sterling would forever be known as the CEO who mocked a janitor and got schooled by her own ignorance. Meanwhile, Isaiah's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Within his first week as senior robotics engineer, he identified and solved the assembly line problems that had plagued Innovate Tech for months. The defect rate plummeted from 40% to 3%, better than industry standards. The $50 million Meridian Motors contract was not only saved, but expanded when they saw the quality improvements. Tech Weekly magazine featured Isaiah on their cover with the headline, "The Man Who Fixed More Than an Engine." The article detailed his journey from whistleblower to janitor to executive, becoming an inspiration for underdogs everywhere. Dr. Carter joined Innovate Tech as a consulting engineer, becoming Isaiah's mentor and friend. Their partnership revolutionized the company's approach to precision manufacturing. The company culture transformation was equally dramatic. Margaret Thompson implemented new diversity hiring initiatives with Isaiah's input. Employee satisfaction scores reached all-time highs. Turnover rates dropped to industry lows. 6 months later, Isaiah was promoted to Vice President of Engineering, a position that came with both respect and a $200,000 salary. His first executive decision was establishing the Samuel Washington Memorial Scholarship for underrepresented students in engineering, named after his grandfather, who'd taught him that precision isn't about the tools you have. Isaiah bought a house in the same Silicon Valley neighborhood he'd once cleaned as a janitor. His daughter Emma's college fund was fully secured. His mother received the best medical care available. But perhaps the sweetest victory came when Meridian Motors offered Innovate Tech an exclusive partnership worth $200 million, specifically requesting that Isaiah lead the project. The video that was meant to humiliate him had instead launched him into the stratosphere of Silicon Valley success. Victoria Sterling, meanwhile, found herself unemployable in the tech industry. The viral video followed her everywhere, a permanent reminder of what happens when arrogance meets expertise. The Ferrari engine still runs perfectly in Innovate Tech's lobby, now with a plaque crediting Isaiah Washington for its restoration. Every day, employees walk past it remembering that talent doesn't discriminate, but opportunity often does. 2 years later, Isaiah Washington stands as Vice President of Engineering at one of Silicon Valley's most successful robotics companies. The janitor's cart has been replaced by a corner office, but he still keeps a spray bottle on his desk. A reminder that precision isn't about the tools you have. Innovate Tech leads the industry in both innovation and workplace culture. The company that once thrived on fear now champions talent regardless of background. The Ferrari engine still purrs perfectly in the lobby, its plaque reading, "Restored by Isaiah Washington, proof that expertise comes in all forms." Victoria Sterling's cruel joke became the catalyst for her own downfall and someone else's triumph. "Fix this engine and I'll marry you," transformed from mockery into legend. Sometimes the person others dismiss holds exactly what you need. Have you ever been underestimated because of your job title or background? Share your story in the comments below. There's a detail at the 8:47 mark that only sharp-eyed viewers caught. Can you spot it? If this story of turning humiliation into triumph inspired you, subscribe for more tales of hidden talent changing everything.